Welcome to the Books to Business podcast. Terry, take them home.
This is a 70-plus-year-old book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
This was a deep book.
Huge book, and the timing couldn't be better, in my opinion. This is about a psychiatrist that was Jewish and was captured and put in a concentration camp. He ended up in Auschwitz, where the odds of survival is 1 in 28. So we didn't think he'd survive, and what he did to survive and write this book is a big part of the big idea in the book.
Yeah. If you had to, because we're going to get into, there's really two main parts in this book. He breaks it down into, his some of his stories at camp, and then he's as you mentioned, a psychiatrist, right?
Yeah.
So he talks about logotherapy and sort of the branch that he created in the field. But if you were going to give someone listening to this who's never read anything about it, like why should they check this out? Why was it important to you?
Well, I mean, I got 2 phone calls today that might help you answer that question, and both were addiction related. One was from my friend Evan, who's an interventionist, and so he's the one who shows up and convinces people to go into rehab, and he says everything is up. Like, people are not connecting a good future to this current episode. Yeah. And another one was a very similar. A good friend of mine had an incident with one of his kids, and it's the meaning that they're attaching to what some would say is a bad thing, and that's the big idea in the book. Like, bad things are going to happen, and you got to find the meaning in that for you, and it's positive psychology. So what's the optimistic, take on something? That's what I took from it. Yeah,
no, exactly. So he calls it the existential vacuum, like the reason for depression, for suffering. It's so substantial in today's age is because there's a lack of meaning. And so, for example, he's talking about unemployed folks. And he basically, when they're his clients, he simply recommends, go volunteer, go do something, create some type of temporary purpose. Right. And a lot of the times what you see is the depression dissipate. And so we're going to connect the dots between his experience, just an awful thing to read, and how he ties that to finding meaning in life.
The ultimate form of suffering, being deprived of food, being beaten, seeing your peers, die around you, knowing that a gas chamber can await the next day or the next week, right. Or God forbid, being part of having to escort someone into there is unthinkable. And he assigned a very powerful meaning to his time in Auschwitz. And it was to write this particular kind of book. He wrote a few books and share his experience about how to find meaning in anything. And what he was most known for was talking to people who were considering suicide, because in Auschwitz, you couldn't stop someone from killing themselves. Right. They wouldn't let you cut the people down. That's what was written in the book. You had to watch them die. It was another form of horrible punishment. So he would talk to people about, they'd confide in him because he was a psychiatrist. Yeah. And they said, I have, there's no purpose in my life. And his famous positioning is, perhaps life has a purpose that awaits you. Out there somewhere. There's something for you and for everyone. And the book is about that journey to, personalizing the suffering in a positive way. And
he attributed that to his life and the lives of others. So like he was talking about, because he had the idea, the manuscript for this, but wasn't it this book? Or was it?
I'm not sure, Steve. He had a book in his lapel when he got
right. And I think it was logotherapy related.
It was related to practice. That particular psychology he was working on and became basically logotherapy. Logos means, I think it means future, if I'm not mistaken. It means a couple of things, but I think it's the study of the future,
right?
Like what's out there, and like that's what the psychology does,
right? So let me
looks forward instead of back, which a lot of psychology does now,
and that ties into his message, right? Because like he didn't have that book, his life work, he had nothing, but he started to slowly recreate it, and he says that's what kept me going. Like there was a point where he had typhus,
right?
And he thinks, looking back now, if I didn't have that book, those little pieces, if I didn't feel like I had that bigger purpose, like I know that's what kept me alive. And he could literally look around and he would see when people lost that will, lost their sense of purpose, or that the world had something for them. They'd pull out a cigarette. They wouldn't respond to being pushed or hit. And everyone would know that's it.
Yeah, they'd saved a cigarette for when they got out. When someone pulled a cigarette out, they knew that was the end.
Yeah.
They'd watched them die over the next 48 hours. So that's a really deep way to look at, a really significant event that he survived.
Yeah.
The unthinkable, like as bad as it gets. And if you look and compare that by contrast to an event we may be going through, like our grandparents fought a war and had to leave their families for 2 years, and we've been, ordered to sit on the couch and watch TV and not go to the store. And and everyone's assigning the most worst possible outcome to, like it's a horrible thing. Yeah, it's not ideal, but what's the positive that you can get out of it? And his whole teaching in logotherapy is you have a need and a responsibility. If you break that word down, it means response-able. Like you're programmed to look at the good in everything.
Right.
Your response is already programmed to say, well, what's good here versus, what sucks. And a lot of people, and you got to look in your social circles, I think, if you don't see many more optimistic people than us three. We're very optimistic.
Right.
But, that's it.
He says I think he quotes Nietzsche like 50 million times in the book, but to live is to suffer, or to be human is to suffer, to something is to find meaning in the suffering, maybe to live is to find meaning in the suffering.
Nietzsche. Very controversial. He had the what's the quote that he had that I think at least 5 other people have kind of laid claim to. It's in this book.
Yeah.
About a why.
The person with the why can endure almost any how.
Right.
And
you have a big enough why.
Right. And we're realizing, we're like, okay, so that's used here. That's used in Simon Sinek. That's essentially, Steve, who are we talking about today? The
good to great.
Navy SEAL.
David Goggins?
David Goggins.
Yeah, why? Why is everything? I mean, it's awesome how it showed up 75 years earlier in this book and was repackaged for businesses.
Yeah.
Repackaged for David Goggins is like a kind of a motivative book. And it's repackaged in your content is all bit driven out, break out of the suffering.
Right.
The Buddha says life is suffering. Right. That's in Buddha's the Buddha belief is that no event is either good or bad. It is what it is, which is related to how you perceive the event. Right. Where you want to assign that to a good thing or a bad thing. Like, it's up to you.
Yeah, and you mentioned like people now suffering, and then the hell people are going through. Well, that's basically, and I meant to say this a second ago and I forgot, like that is the human condition, that no matter how, he uses the metaphor of gas, that no matter how big or small our suffering is, it'll consume our soul, it'll consume our life in our entirety. And then he says the challenge is rising up and making something, finding purpose despite that suffering.
Right.
So it's just, I guess what I find so incredible is how he says it's a necessary human condition. Suffering is not something that's escapable, but it's also not something you want to escape because it transforms your existence.
Otherwise, you'd never do anything. If you didn't have any controversy, you'd have no story, right? All the things we talk about with story has to have some kind of conflict,
right?
And man isn't alive to live a tension-free life. Like if you have no tension on your muscles, they won't develop. If you don't push yourself as a runner, it won't happen. If you don't push yourself in business, it won't happen. If you don't play full out in love, it won't happen.
Right.
Not at any meaningful level. The suffering is the avenue to meaning.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, it's the doorway and the road into what you want to make out of it. What it ends up meaning to you, you have a lot of control over that, in my opinion. Right.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about that in the camp, and so the reason, because that's such a dark thing, right. But it's 3/4 of the book, and he's talking about like the little things in life, the little things in the camp, like bread, like getting peas at the bottom of the soup. Like they found joy in these little things, and it was possible for them, even in the darkest of moments, to find humor, to find art, to sort of create that temporary happiness. He says it's not the environment, it's the decisions you make. And you just feel like as a reader, if they can find joy and happiness in literally a hell on earth, God, didn't it put things into perspective for you? It's like,
all right. What was wild is Alex Vesley is his grandson. And I talked to him this morning. He's in Vienna. He's going to join us on Wednesday for the author interview here.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Closest thing we can get is his grandson, who also built a documentary called Viktor and I. And it's about Viktor Frankl, his life, and his contributions and his person. Is really, really good. Some of it's actually in German. And I couldn't even read subcaptions, but I can tell that he lived a happy life. Like, he was not a guy that went into a concentration camp and was tortured. But he said this, which I thought was incredible, that essentially in the exit interview out of these camps years later, and it was like, what was it like? And what did it mean to you? For the survivors, a fair amount of them said, I forget the percentage, but a lot of them said it was a defining moment. And it was a strength building exercise. Like, you couldn't break me there, you'll break me nowhere.
Right.
And those were very powerful people for the rest of their lives. There's so many great stories about when you can survive that, anything's possible.
I know. He says it's the one thing you have control over, right?
The last of the human liberties is one's own assignment to the attitude they have towards an event. Like, that's free. Like, you can look at something and complain. You can look at something and say, here's the opportunity. Am I going to write a book? Am I going to write a speech? Am I going to get in shape? There's a lot of people marketing that stuff right now because the time presents itself, the opportunity to put a positive spin on something. There's things you can never do now that you'll never be able to do again.
Yeah.
Dinner with your kids, time, 24 hours a day for a month with your family. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's always a positive.
Dinner tables. We have dinner, right, Steve?
That's right.
What was your takeaway?
You eat all the food in this place.
If you had to, one thing that hit home for you.
I'd probably say that for me, it reminded me of David Goggins, like I mentioned, where there's always, the more you suffer, you can always do more. And by allowing yourself to see that suffering leads to that. And then plus just the crazy stories, those really stuck with me. Like you said, the very scarce food, the frail people, the images he described, it makes life now, like the hardship we have, similar to the way Can't Hurt Me made me feel, is if you can suffer and find meaning in those moments, then there's just, you should be able to find it now. And also that you shouldn't shy away from the suffering at all. It's a pretty common theme, but just those stories alone were just really impactful. They definitely stuck with me.
We're suckers for a good comeback, right?
Oh, yeah.
Nobody came back like this guy.
God.
I mean, nobody came back. He was, right at the brink.
It was amazing. And remember the magazine story?
I don't understand it fully. Say it again. I keep just having a hard time.
Yeah. So this is, to me, like, it's just one of those things that like really hit home, hit me to my core. So he's talking about, if I understood it correctly, that after he got out, they took a picture of some of the prisoners in camp looking down from a bunk as someone was walking into their hut, right? And so the outside world is now seeing this, and they're looking at that, and they're thinking, or they're saying to Viktor at certain points in his life, like, "Oh my God, you can see the fear in their eyes, and you can feel how terrible it is." And his thought, as someone that was there, was, "Why?" At that moment, that was the good stuff. We weren't out there digging. We were, warm comparatively. We had bread. Like, that was a good portion of time. Yeah. And that almost broke me. Like, it was just such an amazing sense of perspective that you can find, like, it's the same thing we're talking about. If you can find the little joys in that hell, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, I wonder what the social circles were all about, because he said there was people that were some people were constantly, thinking about the end, just like what happened in Good to Great. Those prisoners that thought they'd be home earlier died of a broken heart.
Tie into that, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically the same concept.
It is.
And
Stockdale paradox.
Right. And it's just he has a metaphor about things in your life. Like, that was seen to be a great time. They're probably being, the deepest level of friends. But the movie that plays throughout your life, I think this was from the documentary and not from the book, but
it is in the end.
Oh, it is. Okay, yeah. The movie of your life, if you're searching for meaning, you haven't found it yet, and you think like you're not where you need to be, you're a failure, or you're not being as successful as you should be, the movie is a bunch of episodes. The movie of your life is a bunch of independent episodes, and they all have their own meaning at the time, and you choose what you want to assign to that. But the end, in most movies, a lot of good ones at least, the real movie doesn't reveal itself until the very end of your journey.
Right.
And I think that's the essence of searching for it. Searching for purpose. I guess basically meaning is purpose. Why are you there?
Yeah, he said, and I'm going to look this up because I feel like it's super important. But he talks about how there's no such thing as purpose. There's only like purpose in that moment in time. Do you remember that?
Like you're supposed to find that you're not looking for purpose, you find purpose in the moment. Like you don't have to go find purpose, you can find purpose within the moment.
Yes. So it's asking I think again, I took these notes while I was running, so they're all over the place. Asking the question, what is the meaning of life, is like asking a chess player what the best move is. It's an impossible question. There is only what is the best for a specific moment in time. Mm-hmm. Best move for a specific moment in time.
That's true.
Yeah, because it just made me think of all the changes I've made and you've made.
Yeah, of course.
Meaning.
Chess is interesting like that. The mathematical move may not be the real move because the computer will know where to move in chess. Yeah. It always has a next best move on the board. It'll tell you that's the best move. And what I love about one of the metaphors he says the difference between the artist and the optometrist. Like the artist paints a picture of the world and wants you to see it like that. The optometrist gives you glasses and helps you see your own world better.
And that's what you're talking about, his logotherapy.
Yeah. That's the connecting the dots to, what is the best move? It depends on what a win is.
Yeah.
Right. And
so let's make that connection. So like the beginning, we talked a lot about that, the suffering, what they went through, how he defined it, and then he kind of moves on to his practice and pulls from a lot of experiences in the camp, but he uses that now to help people improve their lives. And so we're like, Freud attributes, sex. A lot of sex, he uses meaning as the reason we feel the way we do and as the, leverage for changing our lives, transforming ourselves. So that's what it's about. Like he helps people look to the future and find value in themselves that way. Understand that there's something out there for you.
Right. The whole concept of looking backwards versus, I'm sure this particular, in the 1950s, this was have been against the grain because they used to sit you down on a couch, right? And they'd say, what happened? And now they'd sit you down they wouldn't even sit you on a couch. They'd just say, picture the worst thing in the world that happens and what can you do with that in a good way? Mm-hmm. So they're assuming that the bad thing is currently happening. There was some, what's the paradoxical, what's the word?
Intention.
Paradoxical intention, these things that you think are going to happen that are bad, you make them happen. The fear is the mother of the event. And so he has a technology that you like. It was a story about a kid who was a stutterer and got caught stealing a ride on the bus, and he wanted to teach the bus driver or tell the bus driver that he was a poor stuttering kid, so he's trying to stutter in front of him, and he couldn't stutter when he was trying to do it. That was kind of the concept between just try to do it. An interesting concept.
The other concept that really impacted me, the same way that you can suffer anything, and this was like the most extreme example possible, was the Stockdale one of people that died because they thought maybe they get home by Thanksgiving, and then when Thanksgiving came and they didn't get out, that was like their last hope. It really reminded me of detachment, like the universal law they talk about in all these different books. Even Stoicism, you got to accept what you can't control, especially like the date of your outcome. Right. And with this book, it like a lot of times those Stoicism type things of detaching from the outcome or not being so confined to a certain date, something will happen, you detach from it. It's just a matter of if you become upset or unhappy when it doesn't happen. So that because you can't control that or when it'll happen. But this was like the most extreme example of that with life or death. So I'm like, okay, this principle not only helps life and business and little decisions you make like from the weekend, but all the way down to life or death. You have to detach, or else it's a matter of your life if you detach it to a certain date and it doesn't happen. It's pretty crazy that those people.
Well, you ever trying to work out or something and you got a number of reps in your mind, and you get there, you're done. Your brain's going to quit on you. Right?
I had a lot of that with my training, is actually because I would have expectations, especially because I make videos on it. I'd go into the workout and I'd have all these expectations, and I've learned that recently, which is where I've made most of my progress. I have to go there and have fun and really say it's okay if I don't do well, because I tense up, and I've learned science behind it too, which is even more fascinating. Yeah, you tense up.
Did you ever try to run a little further? And not, in your mind, you said, I'm going to run 8 miles, and you put another half mile in the end.
Oh, I always do that. Yeah.
You do it? Yeah. That's I guess, a big deal, because I caught a lot of baseball games, and I never caught a no-hitter. I never caught a no-hitter. I don't think I caught hundreds of baseball games. You
never had the pleasure of catching my curveball.
We had a no-hitter. No, a higher level ball. I think I might. I like the stuff you guys play in the background in the house.
Get him.
The pitcher starts to tighten up as they get closer to that last out, and they're thinking in their head, I hope this kid doesn't get a hit. Shit, it's exactly what happens. Like I've gone to last out a couple times. I've gone many times actually, and boom, there's the hit.
Yeah.
The fear is the mother of the event. It's the same like juggling or trying to do something. You say, if I can only get to 100. Once you get to 100, you drop the ball.
I know. You remember when Schilling was I think he was an out away from a no-hitter, and he called off Veritek, and they got a single up the middle. I forget what year, but man.
Veritek is the best.
He is. He's the boss. Right at the beginning, he says not to make success a target. And the more you aim at success, the more you miss. And this book, funny enough, is an example of that, because he says, coming out, like he didn't want his name on it. He felt like it was too, egotistical. He wanted to be anonymous. Yet this is where he found his face. Purpose and meaning were demonstrated through this, but it's almost like he couldn't escape it. It was the universe calling him. It was his purpose.
Right.
And
success, you can't he says if you chase it too much, you'll miss it.
Yeah.
And it's when you release, I guess, and like a cat, you ever hear that saying, success is like a cat, you chase one around, you try it, go after it to avoid you. If you avoid it, it'll jump in your lap. You ever heard that? No, you ever have a cat? That's what they do. You try to get the cat to hang out with you, they'll go run into a closet and they'll never come out. But when you finally say, forget that cat, 2 seconds later, boom, it'll be right in your lap. Yeah. It's how cats are. It's very strange. But the success is again, going to the avenues of meaning. Like if you're not going down one of those avenues, and the 3 avenues he talks about in the book are a deed or a job. Mm-hmm. And then the second one is an experience, like something that you've experienced. It doesn't have to be bad.
Or person. Yeah,
like you went across the Great Divide, or you sailed across the ocean. And then the last one could be, finding meaning in suffering. Mm-hmm. And it's when that's discovered, the suffering becomes no more. It's just an avenue to ultimately what you're going to do for meaning, which is pretty powerful.
When he says when you identify the suffering, it goes away.
It's gone, yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Also on the previous point, right as a kid out of college, she was the COO at the company I work for. She would be like, Eddie, you're going to be teaching people. Like, it's your thing. You're going to train people. Like, I want you to do that. You're good at it. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to be a manager. She's like, Eddie, that's not your strength. That's not your strength. I'm like, all right. Ultimately, that's why I leave. And it's like years later, what am I doing? It's just the most bizarre thing. The way it came full circle like that.
Well, I've seen some interesting responses to things that you do these things, like in 20,000 people or 30,000 people see it, you consider it a failure. And like in videos, like you want 1 million because you for whatever reason, but you get that one comment once in a while, pretty regularly, where you've affected someone's meaning in their lives. Like they saw your video at the same time, and they've assigned that that good feeling to their own lives, and they averted something horrible, which we've seen in comments that you've had, and or they taken a step in spite of the friction.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, it's
productivity tension. That's what Brian Moran called it last week. It's the productivity tension when you're pushing a little bit towards something good. It gives you a little bit of tension, which is good because you can start to search around. Like, what does this mean? What does it mean when I don't feel good, or I feel like lost, or I'm alone?
right.
That's all about stretching
Yeah,
and finding that.
it's a beautiful thing. What else? What else have we?
I have a quote
skipped
from
over?
Eckhart Tolle actually that was really sums up this whole book. It's one of my favorite quotes that I read. I think it was from The New Earth. Remember when I read that, T? You let me borrow it?
Wasn't it about anger? You suggested I'd read it.
What?
She's saying you really got to read that book.
No, this one was about like consciousness. But anyway, the quote from the book was, "Life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness." And he also says, how do we know that this is true? Because this is the experience you are having at the moment. And it goes back to what we said the other day, which is the moment's the only thing that really exists. Like, there's no past, there's no future. Those are just actual thoughts. So it's weird when you combine the two of...
Can you break the first part down for
Sure.
me? Like, I don't fully get it.
Yeah, it's life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. So what I like about that is saying like whatever you're experiencing right now is always helping your consciousness evolve.
Okay.
It's a spiritual type of
Meaning
concept.
the consciousness is sort of, it's the self, essentially?
Yes.
Okay.
Like your awareness, like your ability to be aware in the world. So it helps you, it's raising that. So for example, if you have an encounter with somebody, like we talked about chandeliers, something,
Right.
and that bothered you and they really triggered you, that could be said that that's helping you evolve. Like you needed that in your life. But what I also like about that quote really a lot is that if you don't really believe that, if you choose to believe that, if you say, you know what, this might serve my consciousness, just like Viktor says, then you go through life, the rest of your life with that lens. So like say you get in a car accident, you do chandelier, like, okay, this is going to serve my consciousness, not in the moment right now, but like if you go with that lens moving forward, then you could look back on that experience, just like you mentioned with all those people said there was a defining moment for them. And that's hopefully because they probably saw it as an evolution of them. But if not, then they'll be like, that was the worst. And then the rest of their life, they probably went downhill.
So like everything's a lesson.
Yes. Simply put, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
I kind of came out in his documentary. If you read this book, which I encourage, this is a short read. Alex Vesely has the document. Victor and I. He hired one of the guards, one of the prison guards that was a psychiatrist in Germany, in Vienna, and he ended up was very surprised that Viktor Frankl would hire him because he was a prisoner, and he said like all people have the need. It's about guilt, and he talks about guilt with accountability, and he connected that to prisoners when they're captured. Prisoners want to be held accountable. They don't want to be rehabbed. They'd rather just pay their dues and go back, and then connect and find meaning in what they've done wrong instead of what's rehab? Like you're forgiven. Go back, and they want to find meaning in the event, which I thought was interesting, because addiction. It's also mentioned in this book in 1952, I think. Addiction, suicide, a lot of the same problems we're having now was always connected 90% of the time to it not having a meaning, an identifiable purpose or meaning. They're exchangeable a little bit. So everything's about that. It's about deciding what you don't want to be, in your life, and then working towards something else, taking one of those avenues.
I remember him talking about that, the addiction part, because he just touches on it briefly, right?
Yeah.
But he says it's like the same thing as the prisoners that we talked about that light up a cigarette and say, you know what, it's out of my hands, it's over.
Yeah.
And someone that constantly goes to substances, it's the same exact type of existential vacuum, that lack of meaning that would prevent someone from doing that to obtain something bigger. Totally.
I mean, they'll look at that transformation as a scene in their life, but many times when people come back from it, because addiction isn't, you could die from addiction, but it's far worse to be in living death, in my opinion, that you don't have anything.
Will you explain that? Because that's huge.
Yeah, the opposite of, Johann Hari did a TED Talk. He said the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. The opposite.
Sorry.
I don't mean to laugh. It's funny.
I just accidentally played a clip.
I heard it on like 3 times the speed. But Johann Hari said the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Like the addiction is loss of connection, which I think is meaning. You know, you're not wired into anything, so you're just kind of wandering around. And I think the opposite of life isn't death; it's living death, which is addiction, like loss of connection, like completely on your own.
It is living without meaning.
Yeah, so these little ideas that you get, you know, when you read books or you listen to the right people, you got to be careful. Are you listening to the wrong artists, or do you have optometrists in your life? There's people helping you see better. Whatever you're programming yourself in, is it helping you be better and see the things that are possible, or is it people that are dragging you down?
It's a beautiful question.
I think it's number one. Did we
Well,
talk about that?
yeah, we did.
In our lives
We did.
earlier today, yeah.
I my thought on that is like, you know, especially if we're looking at this and saying you can take anything away, you can take a positive away from any situation. Like you'll always look at the the world through your lens. But if you can look at the painter and find pieces that fit into your story that help you, I think that's a sweet spot. I know it's a little bit of a pivot.
There's some good there's good paintings and there's bad, people that paint bad pictures.
Right.
Look at the news.
Or not even bad pictures, but pictures that aren't right for you.
Right. They want to put on someone else's suit.
Right.
And instead they might say, oh, I like the way that suit fits. That's probably more like what you want to do, rather than saying, I want to be like that person.
Yeah.
You see that a lot. Like people go away to seminars, these self-help gurus, and they come back starting to act and talk and dress like the person that did the seminar.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
yeah.
I always say that. Like my mistakes in life are not from not doing work. It's looking at someone else or something and saying, oh, that must be the right thing, and pivoting and leaving my own track. Right? Because, yeah, there's just so much distraction, and you can always go online and find ways to do things. It doesn't mean your way.
You get sucked in.
Yeah.
Well, that's your brain's looking for answers. Your brain is subconsciously looking for fulfillment. You know, as you're programming your brain with people that you hang around with and content you absorb, what do they call it? Consuming now. We consume content 10 hours a day, maybe more. What is it? And what's it contributing to? Not enough time reflection.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
So true. It's YouTube. I mean, it's like getting high on your own supply, working on YouTube. And every time you open it, it's like, here's the exact video you want to see at this point in time. You know how hard it is to not watch anything on YouTube?
Especially with the great copywriters doing the cognitive biases to you, incredible transformation in 30 seconds.
Right.
That's I'm so sick of seeing that crap.
No. There's one other line. I almost feel guilty about this because I'm bouncing all over the place, but there are things that I remember that I just were so powerful. When he was talking about people like waking up from, so they leave the camp, right? They're freed. The allies come and they're not happy. They can't be happy. They can't get accustomed to this change. And he says it's because they don't believe it. They can't make themselves believe it. They can't integrate into this new change. When people were sleeping, like every night they would dream about freedom, and they would dream about food, and they'd dream about their family, and every night they woke up. Every morning they woke up to that sound, and they were just disappointed.
Right.
And I don't even know what to make of that or what to do with it, but it was one of those moments that just kind of rocked me. So I'm like, I want to make sure I talk about it a little bit.
Did you talk to me about the guy that, I think it was you, Steve, the guy that puts a suit on every day, gets in his car and goes to work every day and starts feeling like that's what he's supposed to be doing in life because they're conditioned, right?
Right. They have the past experience. I was telling you too, Ed, with the neurons that kind of clusters up. But this is Joe Dispenza's stuff, and it's like you have these patterns that are carved of who you are because it's what you've already done. So your brain likes that known, and then every morning you wake up and then reinforce it with everything you do that's the same. So you brush your teeth, you put on the same clothes, you take the same route to work, you get to see the same people, and it reinforces those patterns. So it chemically in your brain just deeper and deeper.
That's the tensionless life, right? Because you can easily do what you're doing. And I assume that's some form of meaninglessness.
Yeah. Oh, dude. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's nothing there.
Nothing was harder for me than breaking that cycle. Nothing. The guilt that I felt, like I told you, a year into my entrepreneurial journey, whatever you want to call it, that sounds a little cultish to say journey, but as an entrepreneur, I would be running at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday and just have this immense guilt. Like I should be somewhere else, or I should be doing something else, or that I wasn't doing the right thing because I just, yeah.
You know what's cool though? You still have that, by the way.
Yeah, because Saturdays feel amazing still.
But I mean, I know this for sure. I observe, I see a lot. Like
this is going to be good.
But you work, like you feel guilty if you're not working a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it ruins every relationship in my life.
But I know this, 100% sure you know what you're doing is meaningful to you. And that's going to be the way your mark will be close. Your movie's been revealed a little bit more than most people because you made a courageous decision. You cut away from something you knew wasn't going to be long term. You had the wisdom of somehow, or maybe you had enough pain or you had some kind of inspiration. That's the only two ways people change. They either are scared into doing it, like in my case, I almost died, so I got scared and I made some changes, or you get inspired, which happens a lot less, or it happens over time. You finally say enough's enough and you break away.
Yeah.
So you have a new condition, but you're not your, as an observation, your lust for being excellent will serve your meaning. Unless, of course,
so
you're
cool.
just not, doing something you want to do. But I know that's not true.
And by the way, I really appreciate that.
Same is true with the world's almost disciplined human being. Thursday night, we gave Steve the
Best compliment in the world.
Yeah, I know, but we got to qualify that someday. He said, "Easy on that stuff because
It's funny because
you're disciplined when you're jumping around
I
and
think it's
eating
discipline.
lettuce and stuff."
Discipline with healthy habits. Discipline when it comes to healthy
Shit you
lifestyle.
like, yeah.
But maybe not tasks. Tasks are tough for me to do. Discipline, like the same time, same thing. I'm very much with like the energy flow, but when it comes to healthy and getting things done, they all get done. Everything gets done.
We're conditioning you. We know that steak, like last night was steak night, and you were not included in steak night because of your undisciplined behavior.
Well, I was
No, it's good. Steve's a star.
Stand up. I was asking you yesterday, like, because in the 12-week year, he talks about falling back on your processes, and I was like, dude, like, because again, like, you've succeeded in a lot of it. Like, you're, again, an admirable guy, and you've done some great things, but you are kind of sporadic with your approach. And I was like, well, what is your process to fall back on, when you are walking by a pizza, or like, what makes you tick?
So the food one became easy. Let's think about that. So the food one was when I learned about it. I think it's learning where I had a really big experience with gluten, so-called gluten. I had knee pain for 2 years, tried every stretch in the book, tried every rehab, and I knew I wasn't going to take like a 6-month hiatus from training. That just wasn't happening. So I accepted I would just have knee pain. And then I learned from a podcast, actually, that gluten could cause inflammation. People that cut it out of their diets have had great success, like with joint pain. So I tried it. I just cut it out.
But big picture.
Yeah. Big picture, I was like, I'm just going to try because I've heard a lot of things about the diet and it connects to your brain and all these different things. And I'm like, I'm not even worried about my diet yet. I'm trying to achieve these really high athletic goals and push myself and also perform. I was at corporate. I was I was doing YouTube at night, going to 9 to 5 every day. So I'm like, I can't waste any ounce of energy. That's kind of where the energy thing started. And then when I cut out the gluten, 2 weeks later, I was stretching every day at the gym because I would like leave the gym and feel my knee hurting.
Right.
And so it would trigger me to stretch because when I would stretch, it would help relieve it a little bit.
Right.
Then after 2 weeks, I came home for the gym like twice in a row. I'm like, wait, I forgot to stretch. And I would notice, I'm like, wait, I don't even have pain. That's why I didn't have like the cue to stretch. And the only variable that changed was the diet. Haven't had it since. And I was like, wow, that's a huge shift from like 2 to 3 years of constant pain to 2 weeks of it completely eradicating was a huge eye opener for me for diet. And so, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, if you're talking about from this book, would you say it was more reactive, or would you say you are, as Frankl would say, like looking into the future at your purpose, and you take a second and you say, this doesn't help me where I want to go?
So it also aligns with who I was becoming, because right before I got to my corporate job and through college, I was cutting away people, sports, all these different things, because I had an awareness, luckily, of like, I want to be myself. And I struggled with that for years through high school. And then the beginning of college, I was like, not myself. I was really confused for a while. So then when I finally cut away and started being myself, found myself happier, started doing more things of what I liked instead of what other people wanted, the diet and the healthy lifestyle also aligned with that. So I found the purpose of like, this is just another factor to be more myself, which my ultimate purpose was to maximize everything I can do. I was in my corporate job. I wanted to escape, wanted to give myself the best opportunity I possibly could. So I believe it was just the purpose of like, you know what, this is like a huge goal of mine. The dunking was a huge goal. I had been making videos for years already, and it like I had a big external force too that like live up to my expectations of what I put on the internet, but also I would question, do I even want to do it, and all these purpose things. So I think it was really connected to my high goals of leaving corporate and achieving like athletic goals.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the big idea is there's something waiting out there for everyone, and life's about pursuing something
Yeah.
that allows you to give the most fully version of you to the world. You know, a kind of a mission or a purpose or a meaning, whatever it is, and being aware of it.
Yeah. So for Steve, it was athletic goals, you know, being able to communicate through that. What would you say it is for you? And we kind of talk about this with
I like
getting to why, but
yeah, I mean, I like the concept of I mean, my whole program in TED Talk was about recreating yourself, which is bringing something new into existence at a later date. Mm-hmm. It's kind of logotherapy. And, you know, my journey came out of suffering. It came out of being terminally ill, and I went through a lot of painful experiences and sad experiences for everyone. Mostly, you know, the way I was dying, but other people had to watch me die, which is harder. Instead of like, you know, it was an addiction-related suffering. You know, alcoholic liver failure is caused by too much alcohol, kills your liver. And the addiction industry wanted me to, you know, self-identify as being addicted and being an addict forever and rehabilitating me backwards.
by the way, you said that so beautifully, plainly earlier. They wanted you to look backwards. You wanted to look forward.
Same as logotherapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like rehabilitation is about restoring something back to another condition, a former condition that for what it was, it produced the result that wasn't a good result. It was terminal illness. Recreating is bringing something new into it. And the first, one part of it's about, visualizing what that might look like. Mm-hmm. And, what I did is I gave myself a reputation to live up to so that I behave that way. That gave me meaning, and then teaching others to, particularly when they're highly ambitious, but they're also in a place where they need to change. I like that particular client.
That's awesome.
Because they're inspired. I mean, they're inspired and motivated, and they got a little pain. That's a good start, good place to start. You?
Sorry.
What about yourself?
I was thinking about it today. So there's a lot of ways to kind of say it, but I think the way that really resonates is creating and storytelling in a way that's meaningful to me, so that I personally am satisfied and have an outlet, but that also means something to other people so that they have value. And so God, this is really coming together. So it's almost like I want to be a painter and an optometrist. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I want to create things that fulfill my sense of, I don't even know what to call it.
That's kind of cool.
Self-expression.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Self-expression, but also create it in a way that allows other people to look at it, understand it, and utilize it in a way that however it's best for them, whatever they're going through. I gotta figure out a way to polish that, but that's it.
I have the same exact ambitions, and I feel like if people get to their core of who they really are, it gets very similar to those two things of self-expression and helping others. It comes down to that a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of things I read and people I talk to.
Wow, maybe it is that simple.
Yeah.
Express yourself and help others.
Yeah, if you're getting the feedback. I mean, I don't know exactly how you paid. I don't think I ever will. Through YouTube, it's just it's a black hole to me.
Yeah. But
enough people see things and connect with your message that they keep coming back. So you're giving them medicine, and in doing so, you're being fed. Your purpose. I mean, you're giving the feedback.
Right.
Because ultimately you want to help people, and you want to have a good way to survive, pro-survival reward, which is money in our world, so we can pay for things. And then you want to have ultimately some kind of time for freedom to continue the cycle of of inventing things and creating things.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, that's the self-expression is what carried me through before I got the feedback, as I'm sure you guys both dealt with in some regard, because feedback's not always there. That's
You die of a broken heart if you think it's going to happen in a year.
Exactly.
We're only 6 months into this, and we just did a 12-week year plan today. And it's hard to stand where you are and feel good about anything unless you do a lot of looking back, right? Where you came from and getting visualizing what we want. And we had a really productive meeting today about things we're going to implement to contribute, because the base of this particular investment of time for Eddie and I and Steve is we want to read books so we can share the knowledge. We can curate books. There's millions of books. We want to curate it down to ones that can help people, and we like all working with entrepreneurs.
Right. God, it's amazing. Like that is the why. We know the why, and then the how is kind of what we tinker with. It's like where is the sweet spot with entertainment and education? Because you can't have just education, you can't have just entertainment.
Right.
For what we want to do, and we'll find it. And we are finding it.
Yeah, one thing I was just going to say, we just found a really unique way to do it, which is the video we collaborated on, which is a really cool. We did the 12-week year by Brian Moran. Eddie used his what do you call it? I was going to say speech writing, but I was looking for a better word. Speech writing and vocals, and I did the editing of the video, and it came together. It was just awesome teamwork, and just made the video something you could feel from the book. So instead of just a book summary, it's like a ride that you go on.
The book trailer.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think one exists. You've never seen a video
that was
book
the
trailer.
Coolest part. We felt so excited.
Well, we'll see how Brian's going to be the first one that's going to experience this. So if you're listening, Brian, which I hope you are, listen to the book trailer we did for the 12-week year. That's a why.
Yeah.
This is why you want to learn this system. And why you want to take this book in. I mean, if you can't come up with a couple ideas about how to get a more intentional process in your life to find that avenue of meaning, through an experience, through a deed or a job, or through a suffering that you're currently going through, I promise you'll find it.
Yeah, 100%. This book brings you perspective that is just hard to find anywhere else.
I'm super excited about interviewing his grandson, Alex.
I got a quick question from Parker, actually. It says, how can we find meaning in the monotonous task that business sometimes requires?
Meaning in the monotonous task.
So maybe like how this book can apply to monotonous day-to-day tasks that you might find in business, kind of tying it back to business.
My gut, and feel free to jump in. I mean, my gut goes to the Ryan Holiday purpose versus passion. When you have purpose, when something's truly meaningful to you, the idea is it's implying that you're going to have down days. It's implying that there's going to be monotony. But you're just kind of signing the dotted line to go through those ups and those downs for something better. Whereas passion, or that quick blast of dopamine, the people that only have that, they don't do the monotony. Choking.
I'll bail you out.
Thank you.
Because in selling, like I'm going to assume monotony, like the best thing that a financial advisor did, and they always enjoy. It's like, I love meeting with clients. It's amazing. It's so much fun. What they don't like doing, making phone calls, asking people for referrals, coming back 6 times before someone can make a decision. All of that's not, or making new proposals, office work. It's all very, very, or having lunch and smooching. All that's really important. And none of it would allow the client or the agent advisor to sit with a client if they didn't do it. So the monotony of the tasks, my first coaching would be if you can find meaning in your work and not do it, eliminate it, because a lot of times you can, or assign an accrued value to the current activity. And it's called a leading and lagging indicator, like we did it last week. The leading indicator could be phone calls. Like, give yourself a point for the phone call and start connecting a good day to an amount of points, because you're not going to get paid for that phone call until months later. Yeah. And then, for a creator, like you bang out hours and hours of a video, and nothing, like you're just getting action from a video we did in New Year's. Yeah. It's May. Right. You couldn't feel real good about it while you're editing video into the night, right? It's you got to figure out that you got to trust your systems, right? This kind of, these books kind of blend into each other. It's not interesting. Like the operating system was the book we did last week, For Your Meaning. Like you can build a journey and build a series of movies and scenes that can create your life's journey that reveals itself at the end. Keep looking.
Yeah. All right. Well, you want to hit him with next week's book?
Sweet.
Well, how are you? I'll do it. Next week we have Drive by Daniel Pink. Do you know? I don't know much about this. I'm excited to read it.
You're gonna love this book. If you didn't, I already read it. It's Motivation 3.0. Daniel Pink is a lot of the science of getting things done and influence and what motivates people. This is a great book. If you're ever selling or managing people or trying to just influence people, you'll see a lot of the concept of flow in here. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's book about flow, finding flow in everyday work, which kind of will get you, into a better place. Because remember, what flow is, it just kind of flows. Time doesn't go by. Like, we love doing this. Is it an hour yet? Maybe close. I didn't notice it at all.
Right.
I love doing this. I learned, I taught, I connected, and I've created a legacy of content that others can learn from long after my life.
It's beautiful. Thanks. So would you say that this is more practical, like more application, whereas this week's is maybe more theory?
Yeah, nothing's going to get more deep than that. This is a book you're gonna learn some strategies. You're gonna make some distinctions. This guy's and by the way, he's doing a interview with us too. So we're getting authors to come on. You can actually ask him that directly.
Yeah,
but you'll see both.
Cool.
Right. I'm gonna reread it too.
Join us Thursday.
All right, guys.
All right. Bye.